Good morning. I just wanted to take a few minutes to show you how I do my sourdough bread. I have a starter that I started back, I believe it was in March or so, something like that. And anyway, I saw a dear friend at the library this morning and she wanted to get a cup of starter, so she doesn't know how to make the bread, so I thought I'd do a video. Maybe it'll help her and maybe it will help others out there that are interested in making sourdough bread from starter. First of all, everything's measured in grams. So you'll need one of these digital scales. I picked mine up at Walmart. It wasn't very expensive at all, and I've never used one, but I really enjoy this, and I think you will too. So make sure that you have your digital scale on 0. It takes it a few minutes to get, okay. Well, it just has dashes. So you take your bowl and it comes up with a 0. Make sure you're on G for grams and you set your bowl on there. The scale will measure your bowl, so you just clear it out till it comes to the dashes. All right, now I've got my bowl on here. And the recipe, I'm going to make rolls today. I don't know if I'm going to put, I usually put rosemary sometimes for dinner rolls, but I don't know if I'm going to do that today. I might just leave them plain, but I don't know. That sounds kind of good to go ahead and put the rosemary in. So first of all, you need, I use bread flour. You don't have to buy any particular brand, and you can use all-purpose also if you like. And this just happens to be a fresh bag. So I fed my starter this morning when I got up with just a little bit of flour and water, and then it starts its processing of bubbling up. And let me kind of show you if I can get this saran wrap off. And it just starts bubbling, and that means it's processing and feeding itself and getting fermented enough that you can make some bread. So this recipe calls for 450 grams of your bread flour. So I'm going to put, and you can use all-purpose flour. It's a little different consistency with all-purpose flour as it is with bread flour. Bread flour makes them a little bit more fluffy, whereas all-purpose makes them a little stiffer bread. So it's up to you. Alright, so you pour your flour in your bowl till you get to 450 grams. So, let's see, 400, and the way I have the camera set up, okay, we're right at 450. And you're through with the flour. You might need a little bit at the end, so we'll just set it over here off to the side so you can see what I'm doing. Alright, now that we have the flour in there, you want to clear your digital scale to 0. And now we need 250 grams of milk. Now everybody says that you have to put these ingredients in at a certain time, but I just use the dump method and it works okay for me. Alright, it's been working okay for me. So you need 250 grams of milk. And it's best to use 2% or whole milk, I found. So we put in 250 of milk. Now these digital scales, some folks may have been using them a long time. If you go over just a little bit, don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt your bread. I went to 252, but it's not going to hurt anything. Now, salt, it calls for 10 grams of salt. Since my husband and I are not using much salt right now, I reduce that drastically. I do it to half. I use 5 grams of salt. Plenty of salt for that. And I've just poured salt in my little bowl, and I'm just going to sprinkle it in here till it measures me out 5 grams of salt. And believe me, it will measure your salt. Alrighty, that's the salt. you need to have 25 grams of sugar. So my sugar's in a container over here. Let me grab that. We're in a rental right now, so kind of camping out. My things are not handy for me, but I'll get that. Be right back. Now the sugar, it calls for 25 grams, which I usually do. You can put a little, if you want a little bit more sweetness, just add a little bit, another gram or so, like 26 or 27 of that. Let me clear it first, okay? So we want 25 grams. Okay. Sugar. Sorry, I should have had that pre-measured for y'all. Let's clear it out. Now, it calls for 57 grams of butter. Before I put my butter in, I've already melted it. I'm going to go ahead and use the starter. And the starter calls for 100 grams of your starter. So I put it on one side of my bowl, and then when I put the butter in, I put it on the other side of the bowl. So I stir up my starter a little bit because it's been sitting here fermenting is the word I use. But it's just been processing itself so that it has enough yeast to make your bread rise. So we want 100 grams of this starter. So I pour it on one side till I get 100. Alrighty, that went over just a little bit, but it's not going to hurt anything. Now with this starter that I have left in my dish, they start looking kind of bad, but I'm going to save this little bit of starter here, and the next time I feed it, I will change out the container. You don't have to, but I'm just a real neat person, and I like for it to look nice and clean. So anyway, that's your leftover starter. You can either keep that starter, you can throw it away, but it's best that you keep it, feed it, and make more bread. But if you want to give some away, I suggest, if you want to, you go ahead and feed it, put it in the refrigerator, and then tomorrow get it out, get half of the starter out, put it in a jar for your friend, and then you'll have some starter to give someone. All right, here is our butter. This calls for 57 grams of butter. Again, clear out your digital scales. I'm going to pour this on the opposite side of my bowl that I put my starter. Because if you put it on your starter, it will clamor, and because it's still a little bit warm even though I've done it ahead of time. Alright, so we want 57 grams of butter. And you don't have to put that much butter, but I have found that and I use low-fat butter, low salt right now, but you can use high test. That's what I call it. You can use just whatever you prefer. All right, there's our butter. All right, so we've got it all mixed up, and now what they call the proofing process will start with this. I'll clear off my digital unit, and I'll set it over to the side. But I really like this. Notice I don't have any measuring bowls hardly to clean up, so it turns out pretty good. And they tell you not to use stainless. I don't know why. I've never had a problem using, so I just get a fork and get in here and get it to start kneading up. And my mixer is in storage right now, so I do it with my hands. But I would use my KitchenAid kneader for my bread if I had it with me, but I don't. So you can do it with your hands, or you can do it with your actual kneading on your mixer apparatus. So now you can see I'm getting like a ball ready in this bowl. And just depending on how gooey it is, Sometimes, depending on the weather, a lot of times it depends on your weather, where you live, as to how it will do. But right now I have enough, it looks like flour, and if not, I'll put a little bit more on my hands, but I think I'm gonna have enough. So I just clean my fork off, and my hands are clean. I washed them really good before I started this video. So I'm gonna get in here with my hand, and you just kind of turn this dough and knead it around till you get all the flour incorporated into your batter. Well, really it's a bread, but you can see it's making into a great ball. So now what you do next is called proof. You proof the dough, and what I mean by that, you have to, what I'll do is I usually put some olive oil down in my bowl, which I'll do in a minute, and then I flip the dough over to make sure it's got olive oil on it, cover it with saran wrap, and I turn my light on inside my oven, and I just let it stay in there. Sometimes it takes 5 hours, sometimes it takes more to get it to double in size. And sometimes I don't quite wait for it to double, but I do want it to, I know that it's increased a lot in size. Before you knead and proof your actual rolls, and we'll do that later. So right now, all I'm going to do, I'm going to stop the video, because right now all I'm going to do is put some olive oil, not much, not even probably a teaspoon of olive oil, and you just kind of get don't over get the olive oil on there, just enough to give it some grease so that when you lay your saran wrap over the top of it, it won't stick to your dough. Okay, I'll be back shortly.